Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners and viewers, coast to coast, the Gulf to Canada, and around the globe. Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboy's Take. And I have been working hard on the ranch this morning. We got weather, which is good. Not a lot of it, which is not so good. We need a hell of a lot more moisture than we have. And getting water going yither, thither, and thon. So I still have my ranch clothes on, came in, didn't have time to change, get all gussied up for you. Basically took off my ball cap, which is the preferred head instrument when you're zipping around on ATVs in a stiff 30-mile-an-hour wind here in Wyoming, and slapped on the cowboy hat. So you'll just have to give me a little due on the shave needed and the clothes and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully you don't watch me for my beauty. you listen in and watch for my information and ideas. So today, as promised, I'm a day late, unfortunately. We're going to talk about the alternatives to my thoughts on the tricaded, shall we say, global rule system, which I think is being set up between Russia, China, and the United States. Once again, China kind of dealing with Asia and the South Pacific, Russia, Eurasia, Europe, poor Europe, and America, the Western Hemisphere. And uneasy will that be, by the way, because all three of the big brutes will be trying to, shall we say, step on each other's toes wherever they can. China and Russia have already said that they're interested in Greenland too, just kind of as a, for instance. But there is an alternative, and the alternative is not good. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit rat-a-tat-tat up front before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show, because the judges, the Democratic judges, the Obama appointees, and their Democratic leanings, Democratic donations, and Democratic family working in the Democratic hierarchy, they're as corrupt as they get, and shall we say as lawless as you can be. And they are continuing their rampage. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I think the left's game plan is here, given the realities of our economic, military, and geopolitical situation. Because it ties right into what the alternative could be to the uneasy peace between the three giants kind of separating the world into thirds to rule. So first of all, on our rant story, there is no rant story today. It is just kind of cojones to the wall, and trying to get a lot of stuff done with too few hands, as you can tell by my dress, by my unshaven self, etc. In fact, I came in specifically to get this show out because I promised it. Next, the special elections down in Florida. I told you about the special election for a state Senate seat that had been held for 100 years by a Republican that last week went to a Democrat, first time in 100 years. And by the way, this is in a plus red 23-point district. Not a good bellwether. Obviously, the Trump administration kind of were watching that too, because they have removed Elise Stefanik from consideration as ambassador to the United Nations, so that her seat in New York 21 will be retained by a Republican, i.e. Elise. It's a shame for the country because she would have been a great ambassador, but what's more important is maintaining control of the House. And that would give us control of the House by that's one vote. Yeah, that's how That's how skinny that banana is, that banana peel, I might say. Down in Florida, these are tough elections. They're in red districts. Doesn't matter. When I get into here in just a moment what I think the left's plan is, you'll see that these races are much tighter than you can imagine. If you're down in Florida 1 or Florida 6 and you're listening to me or you get this in time, you get out and vote. That's going to be the key, getting the vote out. And the same is true on the election today. And I've been posting on this site, and the producers have been posting on the OTR on the Right Side Radio Facebook site, but they're scrambling around trying to get ballots in Wisconsin to wrest Democratic control of the state Supreme Court, which could be key to the next presidential election, right? In a whole lot of ways. And that election is going on today. The Republican's name is Schimmel, the judge that's running for the Supreme Court there. And if you haven't sent some money, you should. You can just dial it up and you can see where to send the dough. Scott Presler, who did such a great job in getting out the vote and registering Republicans in Pennsylvania, is spearheading the effort there. If you type in his name in your search bar, Scott Presler, you can see where to send money for them while they scramble around here in the final hours of the day to amass whatever votes they can to turn that election. So 3 critical elections right now. Wisconsin is very important. The 2 House seats are critical. If you haven't sent some money, folks, send some money. Our Take Action page, our recommended contribution page, I have it all over the website on the rightsideradio.com. I have it on the Facebook page on the Right Side Radio on Facebook. Send $10, send $20. There's several matching deals, 2x your contribution, 3x, 5x. Get involved. It's not too late. Every vote that they get to the polls is key in these elections, which are razor thin. And they're razor thin because to get done what he needs to get done, Trump needs to move like lightning, which he has been trying to do. Number 2, he needs to cut costs like lightning. Number 3, he needs to bring business into the United States like lightning. Number 3, he needs to spur small business and big business alike. Big business by the use of tariffs as sticks. If you want to manufacture over there somewhere, you're going to pay a stiff fee to come into the United States with your goods. If you want to manufacture in the United States and hire Americans, well, then, we're all open arms to you and you don't have to worry about the tariffs. That's really what the tariffs are all about. Never mind when you think they're good, they're bad. I've brought you information about the Smoot-Hawley Act that Hoover put out that many people blame for kind of triggering the Great Depression. I think that's, shall we say, left-wing, inaccurate, rewritten history. But the tariffs are designed to be a kind of a carrot and a stick combination to get business and jobs and money into the United States. Whether he succeeds or not will depend on how rapidly he can move. Whether they succeed or not in cutting $2 trillion in costs through DOGE and other cost-saving measures also remains to be seen, and it needs to be done quickly. It can't be death by 1,000 cuts. It needs to be an axe, and then you kind of repair the damaged body parts. You can't do it with a scalpel. We're unfortunately too far gone. And what Trump is trying to do, in my opinion, is to kind of crater the economy now with this kind of all-at-once DOGE, hundreds of thousands of federal jobs on the street, shutting down departments, saving money, less federal expenditures, which right now is about a quarter of what gets spent in the United States, unfortunately, and get these companies to commit, because part of the economy is psychology, right? If you think it's going to be better, your propensity to spend is much higher than if you think it's going to be bad. It's called the wealth effect. If you think you're wealthy, you'll spend money. If you think you're poor, you won't. It's simple as that. If you think good times are coming, Rah, rah. If bad times are coming, hunker down. And the left knows that he needs to move with dizzying speed. And he needs to do the cratering that needs to be done quickly so that the country has time to recover in time for the midterms. And the left is taking every dirty trick out of their books, including lawfare through these corrupt judges, the Obama judges, to try and slow him down. Because they don't care about America, and they don't care about you, and they don't care about your job, your finances, your security, your freedom, or your family. They only care about power and greed and money. And they are panic-stricken that all the taxpayer money that's been funding this 30% of the population in their woke and anti-American ideologies is going to go away via Doge and other cuts. I mean, it's all one big slush fund cesspool. And our money has been going to groups who are using it to stick us in the back. That's exactly what's been going on. And hopefully many heads will roll in terms of a criminal sense. Topic for another day. So I think the left is doing everything they can to America's detriment and to the detriment of you and I to slow Trump down in the hopes that he can't move quick enough to accomplish his plan, which is get the pain over quick, have a recovery going by the time the midterms come, and then have 2 years of clear sailing to really finish the job. It's, I'm pretty sure I'm like right on this. It's four-dimensional chess. So we're going to do a little rat-a-tat-tat. I'm going to give you a little founder's quote here, and this is Teddy Roosevelt, okay? I'll even turn on the mic this time. How's that? Wow. This is Teddy Roosevelt. No man who is corrupt, no man who condones corruption in others can possibly do his duty by the community. Yeah, very true. And that includes federal judges, folks. So we have, and you know, this went through a number of court battles too, and then there was the Warren Commission. We have the JFK papers finally released. And this all kind of ties into what's going on today, because this is all deep state, save the establishment, save the status quo, save the piggy bank that they're feeding at the trough at. This is all the same deal, going back to JFK. And those papers, and I've only read a part of them, but they cooperate 100% what I've been saying for 20 years, actually 12 years on this show, that JFK was not killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone. Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy. The rifle that he was using, an old Mauser bolt action, particularly from an up angle, the most difficult shot at a moving target and a small moving target, a man's head, was incapable of firing in the amount of time that they said it was, and incapable really without a really well-trained marksman. Oswald was a marksman in the Marine Corps, but he was not elite. And he was shooting without a rest, leaning against a windowsill. That shot is almost impossible. And I brought you the stories about the man who confessed to being the killer and left a shell up on the fence, up on the ridge, you know, the grassy knoll. And they went and actually found that shell. They corroborated his story. He's currently in prison. But all this stuff comes out in these papers. And the Warren Commission knew it. But they were told by Lyndon Baines Johnson and the other powers that be that the country couldn't afford to be all a kerfluffle about a possible conspiracy to kill JFK, or the fact that they were blaming it on dissatisfied folks in the Cuba regime, since JFK had tried to assassinate Castro. This was kind of a tit for tat, so to speak. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole. We're going to examine this in another show. But the bottom line is that everything that I have brought you in terms of doubts, facts, and the antithesis to the official story that has been out there for 60 years behind this wall of hidden documents that the deep state didn't want to release for obvious reasons when you read them, appears to be true. So, unfortunately for us, because a sad day in American history, the murder of a great man, and who knows how history would have turned had he remained president and maybe even been in a second term. All right, so the deep state, the media, and the Dems are all collaborating on their little plan to slow Trump down so he can't move with the speed he does to accomplish the things he needs to accomplish before the midterms, and therefore, because the midterms need to go his way, in the last 2 years of his administration. And Democrats are actually coming out now. The articles are on the website, on the rightsideradio.com, and saying that the deep state must hinder and delay Trump however it can. And, you know, you're seeing this with the nonsense Tesla crap going on, bombing. I mean, really? Seriously? That would give you an idea of the mentality of the left. By the way, there's articles now, they're starting to track the money, but all this Tesla stuff, no, this is not grassroots. This is AstroTurf, folks. It's all being financed by a number of different organizations, some of them tied to George Soros, other tied to our friend Barack Obama, and others just tied to the NGOs who have siphoned hundreds of millions of dollars of cash fraudulently out of the various programs, departments, and grants that Doge has uncovered. You're seeing their money, their handiwork at work, right? Fraud at play. Yes, fraud at play. So, on the good news side, on the judicial front, a judge has ruled that Biden's shutdown of oil in Alaska, specifically the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, is illegal. So oil is back on in Alaska, folks. That's great. I'm sure it'll be appealed. Our friend Judge Boasberg, let me give you a correction, by the way, because when I make a mistake, I correct it. Boasberg did not sign the 4 illegal FISA warrants. He stepped into kind of running the FISA deal after those warrants were issued by another corrupt Democratic judge. Instead, he let all the people off who were absolutely guilty of being involved in the fraudulent FISAs and breaking federal law. And in the case of one Democratic attorney, one FBI attorney, who admitted lying and fabricating evidence and altering evidence in the application for a FISA, he let them all off the hook. Slap on the wrist, 6 months probation, that kind of stuff. And he knew that the FISAs were illegal. So he did not sign the FISAs. I correct myself. He did make sure that nobody paid the price for breaking federal law and usurping the Constitution thereafter. And by the way, he's still running amok on his cases with the Venezuelan Tren de Agua and et cetera. Let's see where all that falls out. And then there's another judge, also an Obama appointee. Imagine that. What such a coincidence. There's another judge that has now halted the shutdown of Voice of America, which is a several $100 million boondoggle that's actually dispersing money out to NGOs for woke, DEI, ESG nonsense and preaching that choir overseas to listeners rather than preaching democracy, freedom, and the American way, which is what it was formed to do. So a judge has stepped in and stopped the savings of hundreds of millions of dollars, and shall we say, he has undermined the cessation of the message, which is anything but the message that Voice of America was formed to blast out on the airwaves. We'll see how that turns out. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, okay, there is no election fraud, folks. It's all so clean, you know. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, 5 Democrats have been charged with 29 counts of election fraud, all felonies, I might add. And it has to do with ballot boxes and, gee, what a surprise, absentee email ballots, which they fabricated and then stuffed into the drop boxes. Gee, I wonder why there shouldn't be drop boxes and why there shouldn't be absentee ballots. And of course, Connecticut is trying to cover its tracks because Connecticut is a corrupt blue eastern state. And by the way, I'm very familiar with Connecticut. And these people are now facing umpty-ump years in prison. Good. And the feds have gotten involved. Go Pam Bondi, go. Because people need to be held to account if you're going to stop this type of behavior. And if you don't hold them to account, you can expect this behavior time and time and time and time and time again. And I don't know about you, but I'm done with that. Done with it. All right. Oh, and by the way, I made a mistake. 150 counts, not 29. 150 counts of voter fraud. 150. Yeah. On a not so great court note, the Supreme Court of the United States voted actually 7-2. It was kind of overwhelming that ghost guns, you know, the guns that are made through various molds and manufacturing processes which are not typical and don't have serial numbers, ghost guns must be, where required, registered, and they must have serial numbers. In addition, the Supreme Court upheld, it's my understanding, and perhaps it was an appeals court, either way, bad ruling, high court, the California ban on overcapacity, as California calls it, magazines. I believe anything more than 7 rounds or 8 rounds. Many magazines, as you know, hold 14 up to 30 rounds. So, not really a great week for those of us who believe in an unfettered Second Amendment. All right, let's talk about the big picture here. What is the alternative to this uneasy Cum-bah-yah between Russia, China, and the United States in their spheres of influence, kind of throwing left jabs and right jabs at each other when they get the chance, but avoiding the uppercuts, you know, and right hooks? Well, here's the alternative. And it could be triggered by any one of a number of events which are kind of, they have their feet over the precipice, if you know what I'm saying. This time in history really reminds me of the time in history prior to World War I, where you had a number of foggy and kind of unknown and kind of unclarified alliances. You had a number of countries out for their own interests, but also working within alliances primarily for their own interest. And nobody really knew where everybody else stood on most things. I mean, they did on some of the bigger pictures. But it was easy to devolve with this kind of unknown, unclarified, and uncemented spheres of power back there from 1914 to 1918 into a world cataclysm. And we have, in a lot of ways, the same things going on now. You don't really know who's in or out of BRICS. I mean, you kind of know what they stand for. China plays it close to the vest on a lot of the stuff they're doing. You know, Russia can't be trusted. I mean, Russia will do whatever is in its own best interest at the time, that you can trust. And the United States, you know, is no angel with a harp either. So it's a dangerous time. And then you throw into the mix the morons who are running Europe and London and France and, you know, some of the other countries there. And you really have kind of a dicey, boiling dicey pudding of the unknown. And, you know, when you boil pudding, it sometimes overflows. And the way it could overflow in this case is Trump has gone on record here in the last few days that he will bomb Iran. And, you know, the whole setup for going after Iran has been going on here for months. The fall of Syria, with American money and American aid suddenly allied with al-Qaeda, which allows Israeli warplanes to fly direct to Iran and not circumvent Syrian and Iraqi airspace. The, shall we say, renewed emphasis on choke points, which I brought to you the show before last, right? Shipping and military sea lane choke points. America's been going gung-ho to get those open. Because, you know, if you fight a war in a far-off place, you got to supply the troops, you got to supply the planes, you got to bring in new bombs, you name it. And Iran, of course, is a wild card too, kind of like in World War I. We don't know if they have the bomb or not. We don't really know what their capabilities are or not. We know they have a lot of missiles. We know they have spent many years preparing for this with huge underground storage areas, hundreds of meters below the surface. And we also know that Israel wants to take Iran out because Iran is, shall we say, the spider at the center of the terrorism anti-Israel web when it comes to countries. But you have other unknowns too, okay? You have Erdogan in Turkey. This is arguably the best and largest standing army in the Mideast and one of the best and largest standing armies in NATO because he has his feet in the Muslim pie. They are a Sunni Muslim nation. And he has his feet in the NATO pie because he's a NATO member. And of course, he also is talking about joining the BRICS, but doesn't want to leave the United States dollar. And he's fighting 40% plus inflation has for a number of years in Turkey. So he has a restless population, shall we say. Nothing like focusing a restless population on a national threat to get their minds off, shall we say, the bad decisions of the ruling class for the past umpty-ump years. So Turkey, with its army and its navy, and by the way, it's a nuclear nation, could easily march into Syria, Iraq, and perhaps even provide boots on the ground for Iran, because all those countries are Shiite Muslim. And as you know, there is a really wide difference of opinion and lots of enmity between the Sunni and the Shiite Muslim nations and Muslim people. So you have Turkey in the fray over there, but who knows exactly how? And what alliance will it go with? Or will it kind of keep its Turkish slippers in, you know, both camps, or maybe in a third camp that we don't even know about? Very dangerous situation. And if Israel and the United States attack Iran, which I would argue should have happened 10 years ago, not now, except they were mollycoddled by Barack Obama, you know, with the nuclear deal and the whole 9 yards. I think that China, who gets 80% of its fossil fuels from Iran, is going to have to do something because they can't afford to have oil cut off. Russia, who is deeply into a mutual defense pact with Iran, is going to have to do something. Otherwise, their word will be, you know, a big pile of dog do around the United States, which will interfere with the other deals that they're working. And of course, both China and Russia would love to see the United States bogged down in a war of any type or nature in the Mideast, and particularly with Iran, who can put up a fairly stiff resistance. So everybody kind of has their own ends going here, right? And think about this. So we attack Iran. And by the way, that could be just one flashpoint. I mean, there's flashpoints all around the globe. But there's this, let's say a situation occurs, a really big, nasty situation. And let's just say, for instance, that it's an Israeli-American joint attack on Iran. What's China going to do? I mean, China and Russia, and I guess I ought to plug this sucker in before it dies. China and China and Russia are going to do whatever they can that they can get away with the United States bogged down in the Mideast. The United States can't wage war on three fronts. I mean, we're waging war through the proxies, really, and through troops in the European theater via Ukraine. We have troops scattered out over hundreds of bases across the globe. You know, we have a portion of our Navy in the South Pacific, sitting ducks, I might add, for the Chinese, because of Taiwan. And I can go on ad infinitum. So the more they stretch the United States, particularly given our precarious economic condition, the better for them. And of course, while the United States is bogged down in the Mideast, assuming that is the flashpoint for this sad alternative to the uneasy Cum-bah-yah, we're kind of helpless to do anything about it. I mean, if Russia wants to push its ambitions in Ukraine, there's not a lot we can do. If China decides they want to take Taiwan, let's say, there's nothing we can do. And by the way, April and October are the only months that are suitable with tides, sea levels, all sorts of different considerations for a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. If there's ever going to be one, it's going to come in April or October of a given year. So that timing, unfortunately, coincides. But you know, the other thing that all these countries could do is that they could do, rather than overt confrontation, they could play whack-a-mole, because the United States does not have the capabilities to play whack-a-mole all over the world, particularly if it is involved in a serious conflict, number one, in Ukraine, and number two, with Iran. I personally think that one of the reasons Trump wants to get Ukraine over with, and I think he's legitimate when he says he wants to save millions of lives and he made a campaign promise. I think all that is absolutely legitimate, not made up. But that also gets the United States able to focus in a different direction, i.e., immediately Iran and then down the road, China. Because the United States no longer has the only superpower status in the world. And the United States no longer has the capability to be everywhere at once. It's just as simple as that. But think about the whack-a-mole they could bring, right? China, instead of attacking Taiwan, which could precipitate a U.S. response, feeble as it might be, given the fact we're stretched out, could go after the Philippines. Or it could, play tiddlywinks with Japan, as it's already been doing. I mean, there's a million things China could do to divert our attention and drain our resources and aid Iran without getting involved toe-to-toe, eyeball to eyeball in an Iranian conflict, should it occur. And then Russia could do the same. I mean, American and Russian forces face each other in all sorts of the world, also many parts of the world. But listen, they could make a big push in Ukraine. What's America going to do? Spend more money, send more arms? What's Europe going to do? Nothing. I mean, Europe is not capable of doing squat. And who knows what other whack-a-moles? How about North Korea deciding that they were going to have some fun with South Korea? Backed by the Chinese, of course, under the covers. I mean, we're at the point where a whole bunch of things could unravel at once, is what I'm trying to say. And it's only going to take kind of one spark to this collective global powder keg to set it off. And then you have the unfortunate alternative rather than the uneasy, let's just divide it into three parts, Cum-bah-yah, and I'll stick you with my needle whenever I can type of uneasy global peace. And then, of course, you can add in what's going on with the economies of all these countries. I mean, China seems to be recovering a little bit. I don't know. They're throwing a lot of stimulus at it. They're generating a lot of debt in China, not as much as the United States, not even close. Europe is on its really last wobbly economic legs because of their idiocy over the past decade or two and their socialistic tendencies and their high tax rates. You know, the Mideast is, ready to blow. You have all sorts of contests going on now between the United States, China, and Russia in Africa. I told you a little bit about the Congo asking us to step in and help them with the insurgents, who are backed by Russia, by the way, in return for our being able to exploit, or should we say take advantage of, the vast mineral resources of the Congo. It's going on across the globe, folks, and it's even going on in South America. Look at Panama, right? Another thing China could do to play whack-a-mole. They could tell their Chinese company, no, you can't sell to BlackRock. You can't sell it to the Americans. Or they could send in more troops down there. Not a direct confrontation with the United States, but makes it a little bit more difficult for the United States to move in militarily and take over the ports on either side of the canal. And I can go on and on and on. We're going to delve into these possibilities more in the coming weeks as we are the more sanguine, peaceful alternative, which is the trication of global power between the three superpowers. But I will tell you one thing, that one or the other is going to happen. One or the other is going to happen. It's a question of which dog do you want to bet on in this race? And it's possible that there could be almost a combination of the two. A trication, kind of a unilateral by each of them, rather than an agreement between the three of them, to have their spheres of influence, which obviously are going to have friction with the other guy's sphere of influence if it's not kind of agreed up front. And then all these whack-a-mole deals going on. And the United States, of course, is completely capable of doing their own whack-a-mole program. In fact, the deep state's been doing that for years. That's one of the reasons we're in the problems that we are right now geopolitically. Anyway, this is a fascinating time, both domestically and internationally. And how it's going to play out, I don't know. Nobody knows. But my job is to bring you the alternatives so you can think about them. And we're going to talk a little bit about, in the next show, the history of the world leading up to World War I, because it will help you understand a little bit what I'm bringing to you right now in the terms of thought, potential, in the current times that we live in. In the meantime, I got 2 shows out this week. This was one day late. I want to get one out on Monday, so Friday and Monday, but instead it's Friday and Tuesday. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gives you some food for thought, shall we say, and we will see you here in another couple of days as we keep up the rat-a-tat-tat of 2 shows a week with luck. Keep the wind at your back. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take. Remember, hit that subscribe, hit that bell so that you know when these things are coming out, no matter what platform you're watching or listening on. And, throw a like at me too. I like to be liked. Bye now.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.